He can't take a sustained pounding from a man this big. Prime Jim Ross, truly showing why wrestling is the sport of kings. One day I will stop laughing at lines like that, but today is not that day. A pounding from a man this big. Professional wrestling, there is really nothing like it. I'm John Renton with the Retro View WCW Starrcade 1988 from the Norfolk Scope in Norfolk, Virginia. And man, this show was certainly something. It was a tumultuous time in WCW because Ted Turner had just bought the company from Jim Crockett just about 2 months prior. And man, oh man, even though they drew 10,000 people in the Norfolk Scope and there was quite a bit of great action taking place here, there was also a lot of bullshit behind the scenes, and also Jim Ross and Bob Caudle at times turning wrestling into a really, really dirty sport. But then again, when you have humor like mine, you're going to misinterpret some lines. That being said, some pretty damn good wrestling action, but let's talk about the history of this event. So it was the first Starrcade to take place in December after it had been a Thanksgiving tradition from 83 through to 87. But then, of course, Vince McMahon clearly didn't bring the first Survivor Series in 1987 to combat Starrcade 87, which was taken out of Greensboro and put in Chicago. You can check out a video that I did comparing those two events, talking about the cards and everything, and talking about the fact that, boy, Vince McMahon really liked to play dirty with people. But then Jim Crockett got in financial trouble. Ted Turner bought the company. And Dusty was removed as booker around this point because he did the whole spike in the eye thing. He, when he wanted to turn the Road Warriors heel, he was like, okay, I need to do this. And it didn't work because nobody wanted to boo the Road Warriors because they were just unstoppable badasses. And I'll talk about that when we get to the match. But there's that. There's the fact that Ric Flair is still putting on banger after banger after banger after banger. Sting was rising up. Luger was rising up. And they had a wealth of talent. They had a lot of really great talent, but they also had a lot of talent overturned. And in the months to follow, Jim Herd would come in, I believe, on January 3rd or somewhere around that in early January of 89. George Scott would be brought back as booker. And that would just throw everything into goddamn chaos. Jim Crockett would be a booker for a little bit. You hear this in shoot interviews and also on Jim Cornette's podcast because he was there at the time. And Jim Crockett messed up a whole lot of stuff. That's why Chi-Town Rumble 89, even though it was seen as a pretty damn good event as far as the main event, Ricky Steamboat and Ric Flair having one of their many, many, many classics on pay-per-view where Steamboat won the world title. There was a whole lot of stuff. So this was pretty much one of the last great WCW pay-per-views. And even though 89 would have some great pay-per-views, this is one of the ones where the politics behind the scenes weren't exactly making or bleeding their way into this event fully. It wasn't quite, having the serious talent overturn. But then you would get talents like Barry Windham that would be leaving, others that would leave pretty goddamn quickly. So anyway, we would get we got a video package of the matches and clips that led up to this. Starrcade 88 True Grit with 2 T's for Maximum Grittis, or Gritish, I guess. And so we get Shivani and Magnum TA welcoming us, and play-by-play done by Jim Ross and Bob Caudle. Bob Caudle gets forgotten about as a pretty good, commentator. I mean, he was more of a sports-based guy. Jim Ross got the sports-based and the entertainment aspect of it, so he understood exactly how to call it. I mean, he did great in Mid-South UWF, and to me is one of on the Mount Rushmore commentators, Jim Ross would be on there. Maybe not so much Jim Ross right now, but then again, everybody can have a body of work where eventually things go downhill. So the Varsity Club, Dr. Death, Steve Williams, and Kevin Sullivan, who was never a great worker but could always be a great personality, took on the Fantastics, Bobby Fulton and Tommy Rogers, for the U.S. Tag Team Championships. The U.S. Tag titles were basically, they were the secondary Tag Team Championships, obviously. They were originally made so the Midnight Express could have belts, because Dusty really liked the Midnight Express, and then they dropped into the Fantastics, and then they did all their stuff, and they kept battling back and forth, doing all their stuff, and having their great series of matches, like at the first Clash of Champions, I believe, and then they would drop into the Fantastics around, somewhere just after that, everything would just be, it would just be an insane, amount of great matches between various teams. But unfortunately, by this point, even though the U.S. tag titles had meant something, eh, they started to go downhill in quality after this. Not as far as quality of matches, just as far as, okay, this team would have this. I always loved Gary Michael Capetta as a ring announcer. Dr. Death was just ridiculous as far as his power. I mean, just a natural moose of an athlete, insane. The pace was good, and we eventually get a stun gun variation. 1, 2, 3, new tag team champions. Some of these matches won't exactly be dissected because this was just a match to open the show hot. The crowd did love the Fantastics, and Dr. Death, you could tell, was just, I mean, he had been in wrestling for a few years, but just absolutely incredible. Real shame what happened with the Brawl for All. Thanks, Vince fucking Russo. Anyway, we get the Midnight Express. Jim Cornette's Midnight Express. Stan Lane and Beautiful Bobby Eaton. The late, great, beautiful Bobby Eaton, by the way. Really, really sad how his death just came out of nowhere. My God. And Jim Cornette at ringside, and it was the original Midnight Express, Randy Rose and Dennis Condrey, who were the original Midnight Express. They've been working in the AWA. Paul E. Dangerously was there, had been managing them in the AWA. And this was continuing the feud where basically, I think they had the 6-person tag at the Clash of Champions Seasons Beatings just a couple weeks before this. I've retro-reviewed so much stuff, I actually don't remember if I retro-reviewed that one, so if not, I might do it at some point. My time has been limited due to a whole lot of work. That's why I decided to dive into the bigger event. This feud should have worked, but Jim Crockett and others basically sabotaged the whole goddamn thing. Listen, all y'all, it's a sabotage. Jim Crockett reportedly was not a fan of Randy Rose's work, wanted to get Dennis Condrey a new partner. Dennis was like, I came back for this. I don't really want to stay anymore. And everything got all messed up. And it's a shame because both these teams, Dennis Condrey was still in great shape. I know he's had cancer and has battled through it and beaten it. But him and Randy Rose were a really good team. Randy just hadn't been on a lot of nationwide television, if any, besides the AWA, but at that point they were syndicated. And not as many people were watching the AWA, especially in 87, 88. So, the crowd loved Jim Cornette's Midnight. There was a good pace to this, as you would expect with these 4 workers, especially Lane and Eaton just clicking along. But Rose and Condrey, no slouches at all. Eaton got targeted, we get a melee, we get the phone usage being seen, and Tommy Young's like, no, hell no, or Teddy Long, actually, because Tommy Young would come in later. Teddy Long and Tommy Young, I believe, were the only 2 referees on this show. And we got the high-low variation, 1, 2, 3. We got a brawl afterwards where Cornette got racketed, Eaton then got the racket and chased everybody off. So, good thing that would lead to more rematches as far as house shows and at the pay-per-view, which wouldn't end up working. Chi-Town Rumble, that is, which would be under 2 months after this. And so much stuff would change. So then we get Magnum TA interviewing the Varsity Club. Dr. Death's promos were different, mainly because Dr. Death was apparently a hilarious guy backstage. Just didn't translate to TV, but he was nuts. He was great, though. It's great. Rest in peace, Dr. Death. Junkyard Dog and Ivan Koloff taking on the Russian Assassins 1 and 2. The Angel of Death, Dave Sheldon, and Jack Victory. Jack Victory, who would end up subbing for Dennis Condrey at the Chi-Town Rumble when Dennis Condrey said, nope, I'm not going to show up, and then Jack Victory became Secret Service Jack Victory, and Jack Victory had a lot of goddamn various gimmicks and everything. Hey, good for him. He kept earning a lot of paychecks. Paul Jones, number 1 Paul Jones was there, and Face Ivan was bizarre, but then again, fans, he'd been wrestling so long that even though he had been teaming with Nikita had turned face, and he had kind of floated from there. You still had to respect Ivan Koloff. He was the man that beat Bruno in the Garden, and had been just a hated heel, but at this point, beloved veteran. It didn't last long, at least. We got a loaded mask shot, and then Ivan got covered 1, 2, 3. That was it. JYD, at least at this point, it sort of made sense that he would come back to the NWA, and I think, if I remember right, I'm trying to remember, because I think he was on the Mania 4 card. I want to say he was on the SummerSlam 88 card. I want to say he was. So if he was, it was a quick turnaround. A quick turnaround. because he was just like, nah, I don't really want to be here anymore. So he was just on fresh off of WWE television like he had been for about three and a half years. So then, actually almost about 4 years. Then we get Rick Steiner against Mike Rotunda for the WCW TV Championship, and Kevin Sullivan was suspended in the cage, so he couldn't interfere. Now this one was good as far as the end result, and as far as the wrestling. This is where Dusty got, or it was Dusty had either still been the booker here. I'm trying to remember the timeline because I know he did the Road Warrior spike in the eye. He might have still been the booker, and then they might have removed him from Power. It's like the timeline's a little bit messy for me. This was one of those messy finishes. Both are really good really good on the mat and great power. Mike Rotunda very underappreciated as far as his power work. Some good stuff. We got neck focus on Steiner after he took a spill outside. The crowd was popping crazy for the Steiner lines. Here's Dr. Death to ring the bell. Wait a second, the referee didn't call for that because there always used to be a thing with the TV championship. It's either 15 or 20 minutes. You could beat the champion that amount of time, you would get the title, but if you didn't, you could ring the bell, but you could say you could still beat him, but you just wouldn't win the championship. So there are two revs. Tommy Young comes in, oh, I saw this, and then the cage got lowered, so Kevin Sullivan got out, but it's like, wait a second, no, the match isn't over. Tommy Young's like, I saw this, and then Kevin Sullivan grabs him and tries to do this, and they try to do a thing where they're going to bump the ref. Well, Mike Rotunda gets sent into him, gets popped down, and then both refs count Rick Steiner, pinning Mike Rotunda 1, 2, 3. TV title win, runs around like he won the goddamn World Series. The crowd exploded. One of the biggest pops of the goddamn night. Insane. People were so happy Rick Steiner's running around. Yeah! It was great shit. It was really, really good stuff. And then we get Barry Windham with J.J. Dillon against Bam Bam Bigelow with Sir Oliver Humperdinck. I always forget about Bam Bam Bigelow's first run in WCW, or at least this run in WCW. I know he bounced around quite a bit until he got a little bit more established working in WWE for a few years. But the U.S. Championship was on the line, and this is weird because you just think about Bam Bam being, getting a pretty good showing at the Survivor Series 87, and then by early, mid-88, I think he was gone from the company there. He was in Crockett. He was doing some pretty good stuff, and really agile big man. Really, really agile. Damn shame how his body broke down. Pretty much after WCW shut down, he didn't really do much of anything. I don't know what all he did. I mean, his body was breaking down by that point, but nevertheless, this is when Bam Bam was in his prime. Of course, he can't take a sustained pounding from a man this big. Of course, good taste and maturity overrode me reacting to that. And it was well-paced. Bam Bam did some good no-selling, even with Barry's, a black glove punch, and kept just taking that, and Bam Bam would throw him around. Barry, no slouch as far as power. This is when Barry still had good knees, still was able to wrestle, still was motivated. Because you could see by 93, 94, Barry just didn't have anything left. And he was, by 93, he was just north of 30. Because I think they said he was 20. I'm trying to remember the exact age because I know he's in his 60s. I know he's battling through health issues currently, so I hope he beats or gets above those. But we got a missed elbow drop after Bam Bam had missed the diving headbutt, and then we get a tumble to the outside. We got a post spot, and Bam Bam got counted out, so Barry Windham got the victory. Okay, that makes sense. Have a return for rematches, and that way you don't beat the Giant. But, Barry's the good heel and still gets away with it. And then we get Magnum interviewing Rick Steiner, who's over the moon about winning the TV championship. And then Dusty and Sting against Road Warriors with Ellering for the tag team championships, the NWA tag team championships, and good grief, turning the Road Warriors heel was bad. Now, I get what Dusty was trying to do. The problem is a lot of fans were getting sick of him. He was still the American Dream in a lot of the Crockett areas. You could tell from the crowd reactions. The crowd didn't want to boo the Road Warriors. They wanted to keep cheering and cheering and cheering Hawk and Animal. And Dusty felt he was out of options. I mean, shit. He could have put he couldn't put the original or the new Midnight or Cornette's Midnight Express against him because Road Warriors had just beaten him for the tag titles a bit before, like a couple months before. And Arn and Tully had left, and a whole bunch of stuff had happened. But just, the people loved Sting. People were getting kind of sick of Dusty here. And they had a fluky finish where Ellering stopped Tommy Young from making the count. And then they got a big melee, big old schmoz and stuff like that. And they were doing all their stuff. They were doing all that. So the Road Warriors retained the championships. Dusty and Sting win by DQ. And then we get to Flair versus Luger. J.J. Dillon in the corner of Flair for the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. Lou Thesz in attendance, by the way. I don't know if Sam Muchnick was in attendance. I thought I saw him in a crowd shot. Maybe he's just an old man that looked like him. I'm not really sure. But Lou Thesz was there. If Flair is DQ'd, he would lose the championship, which is usually how they did the out to have return matches and stuff like that. As you would expect, Flair could get the best out of anybody. And Luger was no slouch at this point. As much as I hate giving credit to Lex Luger because he helped facilitate, something that happened to Miss Elizabeth and listen to that 911 call and read one of his books where he basically blamed her for all that stuff. Not that Liz wasn't an adult, but it's something that will always hang over Luger's head. And also just a lot of things. But I talked about that in the Luger biography, and people can call me a jackass if they want. But as far as a wrestler, as far as somebody that got it, he was kicking it in high gear at this point. He was. I'm not going to say he was ever great, but with the right people, he could look spectacular. And he did here. And he was a hell of a U.S. champion. Arguably one of the best U.S. champions of all time. If you put a Mount Rushmore of U.S. champions, Luger had to be on there. For longevity and the amount of matches that he did. We got a ref bump at one point, a thumb to the eye, but then Luger got a crossbody. But Tommy Young was out of position because of the thumb in the eye, so could only get a 2 count, even though it was like a 5 or a 6 count. He focused on Flair's back. Flair eventually got J.J. Dillon to distract Tommy Young just long enough, pulled Luger's legs out of the ring while he's under the ropes, hits him with a chair that was so goddamn padded that he could have actually, taken the he should have just taken a bar off the goddamn barricade and hit him in the knee with it, being just Tanya Harding him before Tanya Harding did that to Nancy Kerrigan. But because the chair didn't look like it would have hit anything. I mean, it was like endlessly padded. Now, Flair ends up targeting the leg. And Luger kept firing back as well. Crowd was into Luger, and the finish was a torture rack. But Luger ends up, buckling, his knee buckles. Flair gets on top of him, covers, gets feet on the rope just for good measure. 1, 2, 3. Flair retains. And then Flair's celebrating backstage, crowing while Magnum TA's on the... Magnum TA's holding the microphone and everything. You got to wonder what would have happened had Magnum TA's accident not happened. That's going to be an interesting, actually, what if. That's what I should do. I've done some what if videos. Magnum TA's accident. I could do that. Anyway, but there was also a Bunkhouse Stampede Battle Royal that JYD won, I guess. So yeah, that was certainly something. They didn't show that on the broadcast. I just read that on the wiki and on other wrestling results sites. So yeah, there you go. That's really it for that. That was pretty much the high point of the Turner stuff. Because even though Chi-Town Rumble had its moments, I would argue that Wrestle War was pretty good, and Great American Bash '89 was probably the peak of it. I may retro review Starrcade '89. My whole point is Halloween Havoc was what it was. At that point, even if some of the matches were really quality, the infrastructure of the company was just heading downhill to the point that this is pretty much as good as it got under Turner because of all the bullshit going on and Jim Herd running things into the ground, all this stuff. But anyway, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like, share, subscribe, Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Wetland. I'll see you soon.